Sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests for being here today. Really appreciate the work that you are doing. I noticed in your bait and switch report, and it's been getting a little bit of attention in the media as well, that government officials asked you to remove an entire section from the report. Who was it that asked you to remove that section?
So that's part of the formal process in the back and forth between ourselves and the department. So it was the department that asked for the removal formally in writing, and we included their full response in writing in the report, and we also included our full written response in writing.
Yes. So just kind of building off of that, so at the end of the day, why did you decide to keep that portion in your report and go against what the department asked?
So that's a great question, and the reason is because it's directly about the consequences of the change. So if you look at the report, it has essentially two effects. The first is through the first three LOEs, where we have a universe where bait and switch is in fact possible. Then you have the policy change that occurred as a result of a decision taken by the department. That scope period post-change is quite short, but as we were writing the report, we were also hearing from procurement stakeholders who were being impacted by that change, and we didn't think it would be appropriate to not mention those potential consequences and also add accountability to the department and include transparency associated with what we were hearing about that change in the report, because we saw it as directly relevant.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess, why would somebody want that removed from the report? I mean, that just, like, to your point about accountability, right? Trying to remove an entire section of the report about the consequences just strikes me as odd. Why would someone want that removed?
Again, I think I don't want to put myself in the shoes of the department, but based on the language that was used in their response, they believed that it was speculative and out of scope for the review, right? In the sense that the files that we looked at wouldn't have dealt with those unintended consequences. So in the report itself, it includes a response on a request for information, and we also included the response from the department, which identifies a concern from a small or medium-sized business about what the consequence will mean for their ability to secure future contracts. And then simultaneously, we were hearing through other channels from small and medium businesses about these same impacts. And so rather than mute those voices, we thought it was incredibly important to have them represented in the report. And the department disagreed because they felt like it was too speculative to be included.
Yeah. Talking about the bait and switch issue here, 41% saw unqualified, or I guess you kind of talked about in your opening remarks there. That's a pretty large amount of projects that were impacted by this. I guess maybe can you just spell out really quickly, I guess, for the listeners, what impact that 41% would have on projects, and I guess what concerns do you have about that going forward if it's unaddressed?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. What I'll do is I'll first address the impact on the procurement process. So in that 41%, the actual attributes of the resource were a big part of the decision-making process as to who would ultimately deliver on that project. So the quality of the resource was defined by the government as being important. So when that resource is replaced, it's incredibly important that that important resource reflect those same attributes. And what we were suggesting is in 41% of those instances, that resource didn't reflect those same attributes. Right? And so what that does mean is it means that a lower standard in many of these instances of resource was provided, and perhaps at a higher price point. And then from a procurement standpoint, it could have potentially altered the sequencing in who ultimately would have been the successful supplier.
Is there specific departments that this practice is more widespread in than others?
So of the 7, I can say that 3 were through GAC and 3 were through Shared Services. So GAC is Global Affairs Canada, and Shared Services Canada were the 2 highest departments.
Okay. And I guess, for the listeners who are watching this, how concerning is that?
So I have to go back to a previous answer which speaks to the universe before and after the change. So if a change hadn't been made and these practices continued, I would be very concerned, and the tone that I would be striking would be very different. As opposed to talking about unintended consequences, we could be still talking about the practice of bait and switch if left unaddressed. So to pay the appropriate amount of respect to what the department did do, it did seek to address the bait and switch issue. So I don't mean to half answer your question, but I'm not as concerned given the change has already taken place. Where my concern lies is now in the unintended consequences of that change.
Okay, thank you. I think I only got about 20 seconds left, so I'll maybe just wrap it up there.
Of 8 people. Thanks. So thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for inviting me here today. As mentioned, my name is Alex Yiglich. I've been the procurement ombud for over 7 years, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you to provide an update on my office's activities, including a summary of our findings in our recently published bait and switch review. While I've appeared before this committee many times, there are new members around the table, so I'd like to take a moment to briefly introduce our office. Mon bureau est un organisme neutre et indépendant.
My office is a neutral and independent organization which was established in 2008 to help resolve contract disputes between Canadian businesses and the federal government,
Provide mediation services, and make recommendations to improve systemic procurement issues. Mon bureau est indépendant des autres organisations.
My office is at arm's length from other federal organizations, including Public Services and Procurement Canada. While I report to the Minister of Government Transformation, Public Works and Procurement, the Minister has no involvement in my office's daily activities or in the content of my reports.
The report was tabled 2 weeks ago, and every year it tells a strikingly similar story. The demand of our services keeps rising. In 24-25, we received a record number of 670 cases, almost double what we saw at the beginning of my mandate in 28-19. Yet our budget has not increased since the office was created 17 years ago. This growing gap puts the fulfillment of my legislative mandate at risk. My annual report also highlights systemic issues that persist year after year. Canadian businesses, procurement experts, and parliamentarians regularly raise issues of overly complex processes, unclear accountabilities, and fragmented rules. I also repeatedly identify these issues in my procurement practice reviews of federal departments. These issues prevent the system from working effectively and negatively impact Canadians' trust in government. As I told this committee last December, Band-Aid solutions are no longer acceptable, and what is needed now are foundational changes. To meet this challenge, my office has identified the top 5 foundational changes needed to improve the federal procurement system, in consultation with industry leaders, procurement experts, and key stakeholders within government. Our first recommendation is the creation of a Chief Procurement Officer at the federal level. Right now, procurement is fragmented across departments with no single point of accountability. Notre deuxième recommandation est la création d'un système.
Our second recommendation is the creation of a government-wide vendor performance management system.
Performance management program would address the fact that departments have no formal way of using suppliers' past performance, good or bad, to inform future contracting decisions. The third recommendation is the development of a single, universally applicable set of federal procurement rules. We wrote about this in early July, and I'm hearing enthusiasm for the idea, which gives me cause for optimism. The fourth required change is the use of artificial intelligence advancements to modernize federal procurement tools and systems. And the fifth is the establishment of a framework for procurement data collection to increase the transparency of federal procurements. All 5 of these areas are critical to improving the fairness, openness, and transparency of federal procurement, and the first one, a Chief Procurement Officer, could and should take the lead in implementing the other 4, and most importantly, be accountable. Just last week, my office published a report detailing the findings of our procurement practice review of replacement resources in federal professional services contracts, also known as bait and switch. This review stems from issues identified in previous reviews conducted by my office, as well as a request from this very committee to look into this further. The review revealed mixed outcomes. We found that in more than half of the files reviewed, the practice of replacing resources was done correctly and did not impact the government's selection of the best value supplier. However, in 41% of cases, replacement resources did not meet or exceed the qualifications of the original resource proposed to secure the bid, calling into question Canada's selection of the winning supplier and the fairness of the procurement process. We also noted how recent policy changes made by PSPC, such as focusing on corporate rather than individual work experience, have largely eliminated the use of bait-and-switch tactics. However, these changes could cause other unintended consequences for some suppliers, including making it harder for smaller-sized firms to demonstrate the experience required to obtain federal contracts. Before I close, I want to emphasize that as the procurement ombud, my office has a unique role. Unlike other departments involved in procurement, my office exists solely to focus on federal procurement, and we have a government-wide lens that allows us to see the full picture. We hear directly both from Canadian suppliers and federal buyers. This unique perspective gives us valuable insight into the challenges and opportunities that the procurement system faces. My office will continue to work with all federal procurement stakeholders to improve the system and ensure that it is open, fair, and transparent, and that it meets the evolving needs of Canadians. But we need a fair and reasonable budget to do this important work at such a critical time. In the coming months, my office will be publishing our procurement practice review of Indigenous procurement, and we will also continue to push for the implementation of our 5 foundational changes. We also hope to launch a new review on construction contract administration. This committee plays a critical role in promoting transparency and accountability, and I appreciate your continuing support of our office. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Thank you for listening.
Merci.